Hey guys, this is my getting ready for Challenge A video. I've had tons of conversations lately where people want to know what books to get, what special things they need to help with this crazy year, this big transition. And I just thought it'd be easier for me just to do one quick video for you guys. I'm going to have all of the titles up here so you can easily scroll through the video and find the section that you want if it's just one section you're looking for. I will have a list of things at the end of the video of what I've suggested, and there will be links to everything down in the description below. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing to know is that your director will be going over a lot of this with you when you have your orientation. Having said that, that may not be until the end of the summer. This video is really just to help you get mentally prepared for what to expect next year. When you do have your orientation, you will be getting a challenge guide. And I'm going to show you kind of what this is going to look like for you. Now, your director is going to ask you first if you want your challenge guide printed and put into a binder like this. They will also give you the option. They will also give the option of maybe getting it spiral bound. And there's a third option which I can't remember what it is. So sorry, I can't speak to that. But what we had ours done was in a binder. So the reason why we picked the binder is because I found this awesome planner that inserts into it perfectly that I'll show you real quick. So this is just an example. I won't do it so close so you can't read it, but you'll see each seminar, what you do at home and what you do at class laid out like this. It does not show you what to do every single day. That is something that you guys will plan on your own. Now you can have a separate planner to do that, but I personally wanted it all together. So I got these handy dandy sheets that match up really well with it. So for my daughter's Challenge A guide, I bought a planner that fits in between all the sheets perfectly so that she can make her Challenge A guide into a planner and a guide all in one. So for instance, this is what she does during the week. We have on here logic, grammar, and science that she needs to break up. And then the sheets that fit in have all the days of the week. They're blank so she can write in the days because every community, starts on a different day. And then each day she can write exactly what she's going to be doing that day. And it fits up right next to her guide. And then you can see on the other side as well. Here is reasoning, exposition, and debate. And here is her planner guide that goes along to show what she's doing for each day. So I thought that was really, really fun and handy. What I thought would be even more fun is that this particular guide has extra in-between pages that are really fun for doodling and decorating kind of goals and things that she has for the week. I thought that was super cute, and early on she spent a lot of time filling in these pages, maybe a little too much time. So you live and you learn. Next year there is an option in that same one just to print just these pages and not have the in-between cute stuff. So that's what I will be doing next year. It's really up to you. It might be fun for your first year to have something a little bit more fun to doodle on, but we found it to be kind of distracting. So there is the option in this link that I'm sending you to just have just the sheets in there. So when they open up their guide every day, they'll know exactly what they're doing for each subject, and I think it's wonderful. So that is my suggestion for the Challenge A guide. The other important thing about the guide is you do have all these lesson pages of what you're supposed to be doing, but when you go to the very back, you should tab these out. You have sections that talk about each strand on their own. These back sections of your guide are so important to really discovering what the sections are about. They go into a lot of detail about projects and things that you'll be doing in class. And just taking the time to go through and read them, I feel like as a teacher, it was very, very helpful, really important to kind of also refocus. Sometimes I would forget the focus and the reason for some of the strands. And this just sort of was a great general guide for me. So make sure that you tab those back sections so that you can refer to them later. The easiest thing to use to get started is the CC catalog because it has your book list in there. We'll flip over to Challenge A and we'll just go through it one section at a time. Challenge A compared to Foundations and Essentials is pretty different. There is some grammar that you will need to know as you go into this. The first being the strands. There are 6 strands that your student will go through each day, and these are basically the subjects that they study. The 6 strands are logic, debate, grammar, research, reasoning, and exposition. So your kids are going to go through 6 subjects every day. The first one is logic. Now, logic translated into Challenge A is math. That's your math section. Typically, everyone will be doing their own math program. In community, they will be studying content from Saxon 8.7. But honestly, my daughter, being a year behind, she was in 7.6, really was completely fine. Other kids were doing other programs like teaching textbooks or Math UC, and they, again, were also fine. You're going over concepts, and math concepts are universal. So don't get freaked out if your kid is not doing Saxon 8.7 this year. It really won't matter. One really neat thing about seminar is that after going over a concept and talking it through, the students will have a chance to bring up a math problem that they have from their own work at home. I really enjoyed that because it gave my child a chance to get up there, to walk through a problem, for the class to discuss all the little bits and pieces that you never really think about when you're doing math. And I thought it was a really fun subject. This is the easiest seminar to prepare for Challenge A. You need to have a math program, and your child needs to go through the lessons as they would normally do. The only difference is that they will pick a problem during the week that they can bring into class. And they may or may not get to discuss it. It depends on how big your class is. We had a huge class, so our kids would do it once every 12 weeks, twice or maybe 3 times a year. But if you have a small class, your child will have a lot more opportunity to discuss problems of their own in class. And then any concepts or anything that they're having trouble with, they can also discuss in class. So this is a pretty easy seminar. You just need, and really it's on you as to what you're going to need. All right, the next section I'm going to talk about is grammar, or Latin, as we would normally call it. I think Latin is that one subject for us that felt really daunting. We just weren't really sure what to do with this subject, how to get ready. So some things that I think that you need to do. First of all, get the books. That's the number one thing, and we'll go over those. Secondly is all of the foundations material. Memorizing those declension charts, memorizing the conjugation charts. If your child has a good grasp on those, they are definitely ready. Another thing that we did ahead of time is we started memorizing the vocabulary that they're going to learn in Henley 1 ahead of time. The reason being is, I'll show you. This is all the vocabulary that they learn in Henley 1. Now, they won't learn this all in Challenge A. They will learn about a third of this in Challenge A. In Challenge B, they'll learn another third, and then in Challenge 1, they'll learn the rest, but it is a very large amount of vocabulary for them to learn. So we started learning it ahead of time. Now, to learn the vocab or to know what vocab you need, you can do one of 2 things. First, you could just buy the vocabulary cards that are made. These ones are made by Memoria Press. You can see right here, this is what they look like. Oh, sorry. They are $17, so they're pricey. But these are the ones that go all along with Henley 1. Now, the thing about these is they have no holes. They're just flashcards, and I have to have holes. So it was a little bit of extra effort. I had to go through and punch all of them. We'd write additional information on there, like what their declension was, what their gender was. So, but for me, this was a lifesaver. It just was easier for me to do this. The reason being, when you first open up these Henley books, they're a little bit hard to understand. So this is what my daughter's book looked like after we were done with it for the first year. And if you do not have a director who goes through and shows you how to tab these out, I will do a separate video on how to do this and what my thoughts are on that. Maybe you don't want so many tabs, maybe you only want a few, but I'll have a separate video, and I'll put that link when that video is created in the description below. But when you go through this, you may not really figure out where the vocabulary is or what the words are. It takes a little bit of digging and understanding. Best thing is just to go ahead and start reading it. Start at the beginning and reading through. But all the vocabulary sections are in here. It's just for me as a mom who had not opened this was a way easier thing for me to do. Once you figure out where the vocabulary is and you want to start making cards, your student can make these cards and start memorizing them. I kind of recommend getting started on ahead of time. We did that, and there was at one point where we still fell behind. Maybe in the last quarter, I believe, is when we sort of got behind on our vocab. So if you want to do something extra besides the declension and conjugations, maybe memorizing some vocabulary would help you. Okay, so now what books do you need? The first, obviously, is the Henley textbook. It's purple. Make sure it says Latin 1 or first year on it, because there are other Henley textbooks. And this does not come spiral bound. It does not come with tabs. This is all us. So to get this spiral bound, I highly recommend it, because the binding breaks really easily and pages will start falling out. I just took mine to Staples. They cut it off and they spiral bind it for you. It's not that expensive. Make sure you use your CC discount. I think you might be able to get it at Office Depot too, but I think they're changing their plans. So just make sure you ask before. And then I just got colorful tabs, and again, I will show you those in another video. So that's the first one. The second one is the grammar book. And again, this did not come spiral bound, and it did not come with tabs. Again, you'll definitely want to get this spiral bound. It also helps when you're sitting there in class where you can just leave it open. But most of all, so it does not break. And these books you will use for 3 years. You'll use them in A, B, and 1 as you slowly go through this Henley Latin. In Challenge A, you go through about a third of this Latin. In Challenge B, you go through this again, all the first Challenge A stuff, and then you go another third into it for Challenge B, and in Challenge 1, you'll go through the whole thing. So it's broken up classically so that you're learning it a little bit more and more each time. Okay, and then lastly, you need an answer key, unless you just have all the answers. And believe me, if you have not done this, you do not have the answers. So Henley makes their own answer key. It's a little white book. It's only $4.50, and I never bought it. And the reason why is because everyone that I've talked to says that it's a terrible book. It's really hard to understand. It doesn't have all the answers. When you go to find an answer, it'll say, see chapter 5 or see, whatever, but it doesn't always give you the exact answer you're looking for. So I have 2 places that you can go to get really great answer keys depending on what you prefer. The first place is called Seton. You can go to seton.com. The link will be in the description below. And you will end up getting one of these. It's a paper copy. I believe it was about $6 or $7. And it has exercise 1 and the answers, exercise 2 and the answers, and so forth, all the way through the entire book. That's all it is. It's just answers. It's $6. Personally, I thought it was a great deal. Now, I did use this, and I thought it was great. But I accidentally bought another book thinking it was something completely different because, again, I didn't know anything about Henley. I bought this. It says Henley Latin First Year Teacher Manual, and it's made by Memoria Press. This book was $20. But the reason why I got it is because when you are looking at each lesson, it actually goes through the problems. It tells you the main ideas. It gives you a little bit more breakdown because Henley is hard to understand. And it was very helpful for me to understand a little bit better what we were doing. And then on top of that, in the back here, when I go back, it also has an answer key in the back, and it has all the answers there too. So I have both, and honestly, I went back and forth. Sometimes I would use this because it was really great for there to be extra exercise in there for me to understand, but this was sufficient just for the answers. So it's really dependent on you, what you want to get, or if you want to get the Henley one, but I would highly recommend not and getting one of these two. Another thing that was really essential for us were the Latin trivium tables. This broke down all of the endings. This is all the stuff that they learn in foundations, but it has great lists. And it really helped us better understand some of the things that we were doing in Challenge A. Now, some of this we did not use this year because it is way beyond our challenge level, but for B or for 1 and so forth and so on. But it was just really great charts showing us the prepositions and some of the the rules that went along with it. It has a quid et quo on the back, which you may be familiar with going through essentials. So that was kind of helpful. But I would say that this was really, really helpful. There are also great resources like this on CC Connected that you can print out. So get on CC Connected too and do your own. I had several moms who would print out like a list of vocab and all of the declensions and have them on one chart for them to flip through when they were doing their schoolwork. Lastly is the workspace. Now, not everyone gets this. This is an optional thing, as well as the trivium tables are optional. We really liked this because I'll show you one that's not been worked on. But for instance, when we were doing exercise 112, right up here it would say semester 1, week 14, day 1. So we knew exactly what we were supposed to be doing each day. It would have this already laid out. So we knew how many questions we were going to be doing. It follows the format in the book. But it was just a great worksheet that just broke everything down for us so that we could figure out what we were doing and on what day, and it was easy for us to stay on task. This also can be daunting for kids. If you have a kid who loves to write, this is a great resource. There are some kids who this would be very daunting for, and I think going through the lessons orally would be really helpful, where you guys are translating out loud rather than on paper. Just try to know your kid and figure out what's best for your student. But as far as worksheets go and having something that's organized, this was really helpful. But it would not be helpful if I had an oral learner who we could translate orally instead. So just something to keep in mind. And really, that's kind of it in a nutshell. You'll be doing lots of translating, learning vocab, writing out charts, and I would say making sure you knowing your endings is really, really important that first year. You knowing your endings and your vocab would really be your focus. Remember, you're doing this 3 times. Okay, the next strand is reasoning. And this is a really neat kind of introduction into logic and sound reasoning that they will go through. The seminar is divided into 2 semesters. The first semester, they will be going through a book called Analogies for All of Us, which has mysteriously disappeared in my house. I don't know what happened to it. I will find it. But in the meantime, in your catalog, this is what it looks like. And just one thing that's important about it is that it is a workbook. So if you are not a write in a book kind of person, make sure you get a notebook for this. I am one of those people. I don't like writing in books that I need to reuse for other kids. So my daughter just had a separate notebook, and as she was reading, she would answer questions in her little spiral bound book. We really enjoyed Analogies. It was one of our easier strands. It kind of gave her a little reprieve from all the extra work she was doing in other things. Some families opt to memorize Proverbs 25, and if you want to do that and you want a song to go along with it, King Things has one, and I will put that in the description below. It's a great way to memorize this entire chapter if you want to do that. Second semester is the Fallacy Detective. And we loved this. This is something that we would sit down and do together first thing every morning. It was the first thing that we did. And I just have one word of advice. This is also a workbook. And you can see here that I bought it used, which I highly recommend. If you can find these books used, get them. This one, though, you may not want to buy used. We didn't realize, but whoever had this book before, I didn't look through it, and they had written answers and things all in it. That was very frustrating when we were going through questions, except that the person who had this book got most of them wrong. So that was actually interesting, where we would read their answer and then justify or not justify it. So anyway, just be aware that this is a workbook, and if you buy it used, there could be lots of answers already written in your book. It's a very simple, fun strand. It's recommended that you spend about an hour on each strand a day, and we definitely did not with this one. This one was our one strand that we could kind of do what we need to do. We would have some good discussion, and maybe about 30 minutes we would be done with this strand. And it wasn't one we would do every day either, because, for instance, in Fallacy Detective, there will be 3 chapters that you need to read, or maybe 2 chapters you need to read that week. So we would read the chapter and do the questions, and then a few days later we would read the second chapter and do the questions. But as far as strands go, this is the one that we talked about the most at home, that we would talk about things over dinner and especially with Dad. It's also the one that you'll get caught on a lot. Your child will suddenly tell you that you have just gave them a red herring when you are arguing with them, or that a straw man, or any number of fallacies that come out of your mouth. So it will definitely keep you on your feet for sure. Okay, so the next subject that we'll talk about, or seminar, is research, also known as science. And during this seminar, it's kind of broken up into 3 parts. The first part of the year is doing research on different topics. The second third of the year is science fair, and the last section of the year is body systems. So during the first section of the year, students will be finding sources and writing mini reports on different science topics. Now, this is kind of where all those essential skills come into play, all the IEW things that the students have already gone through. So getting out an old IEW book and copying out that checklist from the back is really a great start to writing these papers. And that's kind of how we did it. If you did not do essentials, it's totally fine. They're writing research papers. And having like maybe a little mini crash course over the summer on the elements of a research paper might be helpful. So what I did, again, is I went to the back of the IEW book, one of the last sections, and just printed out that checklist so that I was making sure my student was getting in all of the core elements and just bringing all that back from IEW. Now, to put all this information together, you want to have some kind of a notebook. CC has these really great nature sketch journals, which I actually really love. And the reason why is because on one side of the paper is blank, so they can draw or paint or sketch whatever it is they're studying that week, and then the other side is lined so they can write their papers out. I really loved that. Now, if your student is typing, then it really doesn't matter. You could just get a sketch journal and have them sketch on one side and then like glue or tape in their printed out research paper and put it on the other side. Or if your student is really kind of a perfectionist, you can have them draw their sketch on a plain sheet of paper that they can add in. Anyway, it's really up to you, but you need somewhere to kind of store all this. You could even just put it in a binder and sleeves if you want. But I really found this nature sketch journal be really great, and I really liked that she copied her papers in here because it was just kind of helping with handwriting and that kind of thing. So anyway, each week they will draw a picture of what they're studying. So here we have a seahorse. She did her paper on sea monsters of the ocean. And then they will also need to make sure that they're doing a bibliography for each of these little papers. They need to have at least 2 or 3 good resources. So just a note, they need to have actual sources for these things. In my daughter's class, this was their favorite, almost the whole class, I think, this was their favorite strand. And they really were kind of competing almost to find the craziest or the most interesting thing in whichever each topic was. For instance, one week we did amphibians, and everyone wanted to find the rarest amphibian. Now, that's really neat, kind of, and because they all wanted to be unique. But when you're talking about rare animals, it's also hard to find sources. So just keep that in mind when you guys are doing your research. And then the second section of the year is for science fair. And that I'm going to do a whole separate video on because there's a lot of elements that go into that. I also put the link in here too so that you can find that. For science fair to prepare, there's a couple things I would do ahead of time over the summer or early into the fall is just think about science fair topics. So the main thing that you want to make sure is that the science fair question that you're asking is actually a testable experiment and not a demonstration. That I will go into much more detail in this video. The other thing you need to know or to make sure of is that the experiment you're doing does not have many variables, that there is only one variable for this experiment. Again, I'll go more into detail with that in the video. And lastly, that it does not have any kind of testing on animals or humans, because not only does that produce a lot more variables, it's also one of CC's kind of guidelines not to do that. So those are just 3 things to keep in mind to do a little bit of research on. Get science fair books for your child just to kind of read through and get an idea. I think kind of mulling over it for a while gives them time to really marinate on something and make sure that those 3 things are met, that it's not an animal-human experiment, that there is only one actual variable, and that it is not a demonstration, that it is actually a testable question and experiment that they are doing. And then the last section of this strand for the last part of the year is body systems. And this is really where your guide comes into play, as well as science fair. In the back, in the research section, it has a very extensive lesson plan on how to prepare for science fair. And then in the very back, it has all of the body systems that they will be drawing and labeling and memorizing in the very back. So just keep that in mind, that this back part of the challenge guide are really, really important because you will be using them throughout the entire year. For body systems, my daughter just would draw them on just blank paper and memorize them that way. So I really don't have any advice on how to do it other than that, but they will draw all the body systems and label them just like they do with cartography. So the only thing I would recommend doing ahead of time is just making sure that they know how to write a research paper. If they can write a research paper, this strand will be really, really fun and enjoyable. Next, we'll talk about Exposition, which is the reading and writing strand. It's a good one. You'll really enjoy it. So there's a couple things that you'll need. First thing you'll need are your novels. So we do 10 novels in Challenge A. If you want to know the order ahead of time, just go into your catalog, and in your catalog it will list them in order of when you read them, starting at the top. So you're going to go read them in this order here. Now, I have had lots of families tell me in the past that they don't understand why we're reading such children's books. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or The Secret Garden. And one of the reasons why Cece has picked these particular books is because they have easy concepts that they're able to grasp and really break down and study out. They're not hard reads, and you don't want this. This is their first year doing these type of papers, and you don't want difficult reading. Believe me, the reading will get difficult for sure as they move through challenge, but this first year when they're writing these persuasive essays, you want these kind of books to be doing this with. I am a big follower of the Read Aloud Revival. We love reading in our house. We love going through a lot of these novels. And one of the things that she recommends in her podcast is reading 2 different ways. And that way the information just really kind of sticks in your brain and you're able to marinate on it longer. The 2 different ways being both orally and regular, visually. And so we tried to do that with all these novels, and we tried to start them ahead of time. Some of these we were able to read that last year of Essentials. And then most of the rest of them we read over the summer before Challenge A. And I liked to read them out loud. So we started with The Secret Garden, and I read out loud to all my kids. And then that kind of gave my daughter a baseline of the story. So she'd read it, she knew the concepts, so that when she went back in and read it on her own for Challenge A, there wasn't so much that she had to absorb. One really great resource that I did not take advantage of because I didn't really understand was Words Aptly Spoken Children's Literature. Now, this book goes through every novel that they read in both Challenge A and Challenge B, and it gives you reading information and tips. I'm kind of really kicking myself now. We're going into Challenge B, and I'm just now grasping all these things and thinking, we could have done so much more. We could have really experience these books a little bit better. Not just reading them to get them done and to get the paper done, but to really experience the books. For instance, this is the Secret Garden section. It talks about the author, which really we don't put a lot of emphasis on. The whole point of reading these books is to find out what the author is trying to tell us in the story. Then in this particular book, it talks about how to kind of dive in and make this book more relatable. It has a whole section on mapping, which you wouldn't think would be for the Secret Garden, but it really ties in really well. And it also ties in really well to this year where we're starting to really look at maps in cartography. It has a Going Deeper section and talking about the worldview and what was going on around this time. And then what's really, really great is for each chapter, it has discussion questions. And these are not just helpful if you haven't read the book, which are very helpful. If you haven't read the book, you really need to get this, especially if you're not going to read all the books with your student, because you can still engage in discussion with these questions. But also, these are just great sitting around the table at dinner time and bringing these up, because you really want to spend this year drawing out truth and getting your children to think. That's what this program is. It's a thinking program. And you can't think and you can't draw out these things if you don't ask questions. So this book is phenomenal. Please get it and please use it, because, gosh, I really feel like we missed out on some good discussion without having this book. And I know you can ask questions on your own, but some of the things that they ask in here are just really, really deep and really a great way to draw out those questions. So you'll have your novels, get your children's literature, Words Aptly Spoken. Okay, just a quick tip on buying novels. Don't buy these at full price if you don't have to. These are all standard classics. You should be able to find most of these books used for sure. What I did is I made a list that I kept in my wallet of all the books from Challenge A to Challenge 1. And anytime we went to a used book sale or a thrift store or a yard sale, I would pull that list out and see if any of those titles were there. And in the process, and I actually have a huge box full of just these classics up in the attic. Now, some of the books I have several copies of, but when you start to go into challenge, you may be asked to direct and you're going to have at least 2 copies. You want to have another copy. If you are a highlighter or marker up of books, you're going to have several copies, one for each of your kids going down. So it's not a bad idea to grab a bunch of these copies if you see them. And it's just been a really cheap way for us to get all of these books without having to go and buy them. So just a quick tip for that. I hope that you guys can get your hands on them used. And then you're always going to have the one where you can't and you have to buy it new because you just couldn't find it anywhere. So that is my little word of advice. The next thing you'll need is the Lost Tools of Writing, the teacher guide, and a student guide. The teacher guide is your source for how to do this. You need this. It really goes through and shows you how to do this. And then, of course, the student workbook this is what they'll be working through to write their essays. Again, if you are not a writey in workbooky person, then get a separate notebook for your student for this. When you buy this set, you can get a little coupon thing that will give you a website to go to that has all the video resources for this book online. Please use that because it is so helpful, especially if you're struggling at all with this program. This program is a little bit different than a lot of writing programs, and it's very, very different from IEW. So your IEW stuff is going to be, you're not going to use it at all. I feel like during this strand, you'll use that more in the research strand. Personally, we didn't use any of that. These papers are persuasive essays, and the first few essays, you're going to think this is the dumbest thing you've ever written. It is so easy. It's not challenging. You don't understand. It doesn't make sense. And believe me, by the end of the year, your child will be producing really beautiful essays. It's the classical model. It's slowly building on what they learn and making it into this wonderful product. And they will use it again in B and again in 1, and it will only get better. So just stick with it. It's amazing, but it does seem very strange in the beginning. Now, I have one last thing to tell you about that. So this student workbook, like I said, it was building on, and you will use these worksheets. The one thing that I feel like is lacking in the student workbook is that it does not have everything that you need for every essay. And I will try to explain this well. So for instance, in your first essay, the students will learn how to make an outline and how to make an Annie chart. And you just need to know those are the 2 things that they'll need to learn. So you have an Annie chart, how to form an outline. Now, when you get to essay 2, it's already assumed that you know that you need to make an Annie chart and you know that you need to have an outline. But those worksheets will not be in this book for essay 2. So you will need to either have a separate sheet of paper to make your Annie chart and make your outline, or you can do it maybe on your computer. And then you can start doing these essay 2 things. Now for essay 3, it's the same. They're going to teach you a new concept and have new worksheets for that new concept, but there will not be the outline, there will not be the Annie chart, there will not be the thing you learned in 2, which is sorting. So you have to go back and look at those and maybe write them down on a sheet. Does that make sense? Where it's just showing you it just has the new worksheets. So I found that very frustrating because for several essays, I did not realize that we were supposed to be going back and doing those things. I just assumed that everything was in here for my daughter to fill out. And she was doing the next things that she needed to do, but she was missing out on all the previous stuff that they were learning. So here is what I recommend for you. I will try and put a link in the comments to CC Connected, and hopefully this file will be on the new CC Connected. If it is not, I am so sorry. But I can get it to you this way. So if you are on Facebook, go and join the Challenge A Families page. It is wonderful. So many great things on there. Please join that. And when you get into that group, you're going to search for a document. And the document was made by this wonderful, wonderful person. Her name is Erica Sayer, Sayre Rhodes, Rhodes. And she's also here on YouTube too, if you want to follow her for things. All you have to do is search for her name, and the very first thing that will come up, it's called LTOW-CHA Workbook.pdf. And she has created a workbook that you can get spiral bound just like this, and it has every worksheet for every paper that you write. It's phenomenal. I loved it. It was very easy, much easier for us to go through because my daughter's a worksheet person and a checklist person. So that was easy for her to be like, okay, I did my outline. Here's my Annie chart. Here's the first thing I need to add, the second thing I need to add, and so forth and so on. That is my kid. That is just who my daughter is. You may not have a child like that. Your child may be very oral, and doing the outline, you need to for sure need to write that down, and same with the Annie chart. But some of the extra things like adding parallelism or adding some of the extra tools that you need to add in, you may want to do those orally. And then this notebook would not be good for you because it would just maybe feel very daunting and like too much extra work. So really make sure you know your kid. Don't scare them and give them too much extra things that will kind of take away from what they're trying to learn. All right, and so for exposition, they're reading a book. They are gleaning and asking a question and gleaning all that information from the book, and then they're writing a persuasive essay. And they'll do 10 of those. And it's really great when you see the beginning versus the end. I can't say enough great things. I don't think you need anything extra. Just enjoy it. And I really recommend you reading ahead of time to your kids. But if you can't, you have this too to ask questions. But if you can, having the extra layer where they get the book twice, they get to hear it, and then they get to go through and read it. Those are great. Some people will do a highlighting system. I print out these bookmarks where each color represented something. Like if you did pink, it was like dates, and green was facts and all of this. And honestly, we didn't do it for any of the books. Find out what works best for you and come up with your own thing. But that could be a great tool, highlighting, if you want to do something like that. Okay, and the last strand is called debate, which is actually cartography, or sort of world history and mapping all put together in one. This is probably my favorite. Yeah, so we'll take a little bit of time talking about it. The first thing that you'll need is the cartography book. And it's this really beautiful hardcover, wonderful book, but I really had a problem with it because when you try and lay it flat and you're doing maps on it, it doesn't stay flat. So I did a thing. I took mine to Staples and I had them cut off the binding and I had them laminate the cover and make it spiral bound. And look how beautiful it lays. Now, I don't know if every Staples will do that, but mine did, and they were wonderful. And they just photocopied the cover and put it in this, and they do a good job. I was so proud of this. But you can just use it as it is. It just really annoyed me. And if 3 kids going through a challenge, I just felt like I just needed to do it. Anyway, so cartography is really great. They're learning how to draw the world. But truly the goal of this is to know where places are and to be able to, if someone says there was a war in Armenia, that they can say, oh, Armenia, I know where that is, be able to point out on the map and know what things are happening or what countries are attached to it and how this affects it. Or there's a war in Ukraine. Well, who's affected by that? You can see Russia and you can see the Ukraine and refugees. Where can they go? They're going down to Romania. They're going up to Poland. So it's really, I feel like it's really important for them to know where things are. And the point of the strand is not to draw a beautiful map necessarily, but to know where to find things that they are hearing about. So just keep that in mind as you go through this strand. I think that sometimes we get caught up in the wrong thing, what our expectations are. But what's really great about this book is that it's kind of a combination of history and geography. And as you guys read through this book together, please make sure you read through it. I think that's something that gets skipped. We get so focused on the drawing that you need to be drawing for an hour. It's really not. So many great things to learn in this wonderful book. So for instance, we'll just look at the first thing. So the first thing that they draw is North America. And they kind of they go down North America, Central, South America, and then they go over to Europe and draw down that way. But what's really cool about this is that as you're reading, they will have these like discussion questions in each section or give you like challenges like compare North America to the 6 other continents. And honestly, that seems like a pretty simple thing to do, but we spent a really long time, and me and my daughter, but also my 2 other kids got into it, spent a really long time comparing and contrasting the other continents. You can spend as much time or as little time on these, but it was kind of fun to just pick one question a day and sort of dive into it. And you certainly don't need to do that, but some of the questions were really interesting. They really brought up a lot of good discussion And then so like another question, why does Canada have 2 official languages? How does it compare to the United States and Mexico? And so it's just different things that you just normally wouldn't think about or discuss, but they have these really great questions in each section. They have these beautiful maps, topography and geography, different ways for them to trace and study them. Some families brought in a pad of tracing paper and their students would pull these out and just trace, and that's how they learned how to draw these continents. Me personally, really love the draw books. So this is going to be my little like quick like sales pitch for buying these. I don't get paid to do it. I just love these books. Okay, so there's one for each continent. Well, that's not true. Asia has 2, but they're the draw books and you can get them on sale sometimes. So I just slowly over the years bought them one at a time, and I'll show you why I love these so much. Let me find my Canada. So here's Canada and Greenland. I said 1 per continent. That's a lie because this is just Canada and Greenland. But what's really great about these books, and Kristen who made these, is that all you do on each page is draw whatever is in red. So you just draw the things in red and you just keep adding on a little bit at a time, just adding the red things on each page. What I really like about them too is that she kind of talks through how things look and how to draw them. It just sort of sticks in your brain. I really love the way these are done. They're so well done. And she goes into so much detail. I mean, look at this. And it's really simple. It's just drawing little lines. That's all it is. It's like the oils. You just draw one little thing and add another little thing, and suddenly you have this entire continent. And it's all labeled and wonderful. So this is what my daughter used to make her maps. A couple things, though, that we had an issue with this. And it was just us. There are no grid lines on these drawings. So when you have the full continent at the end, you don't have the equator, you don't have the Tropic of Cancer or any of these latitude or longitude lines to help you know where the continents are. This became a little bit of an issue when we went to draw the entire world, because she was so used to drawing each continent on its own sheet of paper that she failed to see how they were connected. So she would have North America really huge, and then South America, she would hardly have any room at the bottom to draw it. And then going into Asia and Africa, they would all be like squished up at the top of the sheet of paper, and then Australia would be way down here. And I realized that we never talked about grid lines, and that would have been really helpful. And maybe even in the book, going through in the book and drawing where the equator would be, or the prime meridian or whatever, that could have been pretty helpful, because the books don't have that, because you're just drawing one continent at a time. So that would be my only thing, is have those marks in there. That would make it a lot better. So using the draw books is how we learned how to draw them and kind of memorize countries. But to memorize capitals, if that's something that you want to do, but also in general to memorize, there's a really great app. It's called Cetera. I highly recommend it. It's amazing. You can create quizzes for any continent, and you can include countries, you can include capitals, you can include flags. They have all kinds of things. It's a really fun app that's a great way to memorize, and it's not free. I can't remember. It's not very expensive. It's totally worth the price. So if you have that ability with a little tablet or phone or whatever for your kid, I really recommend that. Cetera is not only just an app, but they also have these great worksheets. This one is from Cetera, and you can see it's all the countries labeled with numbers. And then along the side here, all you have to do is write the country and or capital next to it. So this was a really great resource. There's also mamas on CC Connected who've made similar things as well. So those you can get at Cetera.com or again on CC Connected. And that was really helpful, especially if you don't have a drawer. This is a great way for them to memorize the world and where things are just with labeling. You could even have them get a piece of tracing paper and trace this map, putting it up against a window and tracing it. Easy, inexpensive way to memorize. Now, when it comes to paper, there are 2 different pads of paper that I got my daughter. The first was a sketch pad, just a regular size paper sketch pad, and this is what she would use to draw individual continents or parts of continents. And she did for every, week all the way through. I think she went through 2 of these sketch pads in the year. And then once she started drawing like big continents or like hemispheres or the world, I got her a big sketch pad for doing those big drawings. And so this was what she did halfway through the year. And you can see where she was able to get all her continents on there from what they learned. Because that was about halfway through the year when they had North America, South America, and Europe. And they can fit all that on one of those. And let's see what size this is. It says 18 by 12. Now, there are 2 things that if you want to do this the right way, you should get, which we did not do this the right way. But a T-square is really, really helpful for drawing those guide marks. So if you can get a T-square, and if you get a T-square that's big enough for this, you can get an 18-inch T-square, which we got. We just never used it. And that way you can draw the equator, and then you can draw all your other lines on there. But if you're just working with a small pad, getting a regular ruler or a smaller T-square would work great too. Okay, real quick, here's a recap of all the things that you need. So first off, logic. All you need is your math curriculum. For grammar, you need to have the purple guide, the grammar blue book, and some kind of an answer key. Those are things you have to have. The recommendations that I would recommend is also having the trivium table or something similar printed out from CC Connected, Workspace A, and flashcards. For research, you need to have some kind of a notebook for them to put all their research information in. I recommend the Nature Sketch Journal, but really any kind of notebook that they can put a drawing and their paper in is perfectly acceptable. You will also need sources, but those you can just get at your library or online sources. For reasoning, you need the Analogies for All of Us and the Fallacy Detective. For exposition, you need the Lost Tools of Writing teacher book and student guide. You also need all the novels. There are 10. That is all that was required. I highly, highly recommend you getting the Words Aptly Spoken Children's Literature, and I also recommend you downloading that file from the Facebook group Challenge A Parents by Erica Sayer Rhodes, because that is a really great resource. And lastly, for debate, you need the cartography book, paper, and pencils. I highly recommend getting the Art K-12 draw books and the Cetera app. You can also get free resources at Cetera.com. You will also need your Challenge A guide, which your director will give you, as well as some kind of a planner. If you want the planner that we used, I've got the link in the description below. Okay, so getting organized. You have all these books now. The very number one thing you need to do after you get these books is put a label on all of them. You will forget that every single person in your class is going to have the same exact books, and you want to make sure that they are all labeled in some way. I just printed out family labels and stuck them on all the books. That was the easiest thing for me. Lastly, the other last thing that you should get is some kind of a folder, because when your child needs to bring in just an Annie chart or just a math problem, you want to have something to stick those pages in that they will be able to grab up. All right. So how are you going to get all this stuff to CC? Let me show you an example of what you'll be carrying for week 1 to help you decide better. So for week 1, logic, which is math, you just need to have your problem to take to class. So I would stick that in your folder. For grammar, your student is going to need their purple book, their blue book, and any problems that they had during the week. So typically my daughter would just bring in her Workspace A into class. So if there were any questions she had it there. So far, so good. For research, my daughter would bring in her Nature Sketch Journal because it would already have her picture and her paper already in there. For reasoning, they'll need to have their Analogies book, which I can't find, so we're just going to use this. It's about the same size. For exposition, they'll need to have the current book that you're reading. So that first one would be The Secret Garden. And the work that they've been doing during the week, which could fit in their little folder there. They'll also need their Lost Tools of Writing book. For cartography, they'll need to bring their cartography book and a sketch pad. and possibly a T-square. So that's where we're at so far. Now on top of that, you probably want to send some paper with your student for exercises that they will do. I also sent my daughter with her challenge guide in case she needed to make notes for things that she needed to do throughout the week. She would also have an extra notebook and a pencil case that had pencils, dry erase marker, and an eraser and colorful pens that she would use in class, as well as highlighters. You can see we're getting pretty hefty. We did have one student in our class this year who carried a backpack, and it was massive. Everybody else pretty much had a crate. It's really up to you. I think you could do it either way. I would recommend a crate, but I'll tell you what kind of crate to get. I wanted to get a cute crate for my daughter, so we went to Walmart and got a sewing machine bag. It was about $40, and it was pretty good. The problem with it is it's not as sturdy as a lot of bags, and the zippers, sometimes things would fall out. It did have a lot of nice pockets in it, which was really nice. Most everyone else in the class got crates, like just regular crates, and those things seemed really sturdy and seemed to last pretty well. I will have a master list for you in the comments below. It links back to our page, thestayatHomeFamily.com. If you guys need any extra resources, please visit us there. There's also other videos here for CC specific things like essentials if you're getting ready for that. So I hope that's helpful. And leave me a comment if you guys have any questions. I usually get back to those pretty quickly. I'll try. Anyway, hope that was helpful. Talk to you later.